Hi, everybody. It's Mary Esther here. We have Tiffany and we have Elynn Lee with us today. Elynn is a former CS student, works at Quora now, and we're just going to ask her some questions and let her share her knowledge with us. So thank you for being with us today. Happy to have you and see you again. Start off by telling us what you're doing now, what your job is, and how much you love it.
Sounds good. So like Mary Esther mentioned, my name's Elynn. I currently work as a product manager at Korra, and I run the internationalization team. So what that means is I work on the team that brings Korra, the product, into other languages outside of English. This is a really important team because Korra's mission is to share and grow the world's knowledge, and the majority of the world doesn't speak English. And so what that means is in order for us to achieve our mission, we have to be available for people to find the information and the knowledge they're looking for, even if they don't speak English. So my team focuses on bringing Korra to non-English speaking markets, as well as supporting our developers at Korra by building abstractions and platforms that they can use so that the products they're building in English work automatically in these other languages. So Korra is a knowledge sharing platform where people can come and ask questions and write answers and share what they know. So a very common reason why you might want to ask a question on Quora is you might have a question that someone all the way across the world knows the answer to. And it might not be something that you're able to just search online and find an easy answer. You might need to actually get some information from someone who has direct experience, and they may not be somebody who's in your network. So as an example, when I was in college, I used to write a lot about how I got my internships and things like, you know, what do you wear to the career fair, or like, what do you put on your resume? And what was cool was that there were people who didn't go to top 10 schools or didn't go to a school where computer science was a huge department, and they were able to find information on Quora based on things that I was writing. And so I was able to like help people. And so we empower people from all different disciplines and all different walks of life to do the same thing.
What do you do on a daily basis at work? What's your job like?
Yeah. So product management's kind of interesting. I like to say that I have average weeks instead of average days. So during the week, I will check in on different people on my team. So one of the major components of my job is to run different projects. So we might have a project where we want to increase the number of answers that are written on Quora every week. Or we might have a project where we want to get more people to sign up for a Quora account. And so I would run one of those projects with an engineer, a designer, and a data scientist. And then another part of what I do is I try to map out what our team is going to be doing in the future. So I work on the internationalization team. One of the pretty big components of that is figuring out what languages we're going to launch next. So some of that is market research, some of that is looking at financial data, some of that is looking at what languages are users asking for. So it's a big mix of, you know, checking in on projects that are going on right now and also planning for the future. And then personally, I also do a lot of stuff at our company. So right now I'm doing a lot of stuff related to how our company tracks progress, especially in this world where we're all working remotely. Korra is a really small company, so when we all went remote, we were not really used to not seeing everybody every day. So one of the things that I've been working on is creating norms and processes that help us work more efficiently together while we're all remote.
That did lead me to a question. I was wondering how big your team was and whether it was international or local.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Quora as an entire company is about 250 people total. Most of us are in Mountain View. We do have a small office in New York and a small office in India, but the majority of us are all in Mountain View, California. My team is relatively small. We have 3 engineers on the team, a data scientist, a designer, and a whole team of community managers for all of the languages that we're in. I think I forgot to mention, but we are in 24 different languages, so English and then 23 other languages. So the extended team gets pretty big.
How long have you been working at Quora?
Okay, that's right. So I've been at Quora for about 5 years now. I've worked on a number of different teams while I'm here, and I've been on internationalization for a little over 2 years, I think. It was definitely really different going from really large companies to a tiny company. So when I was at Google, I was on the smallest team I'd ever worked on, which was three engineers. But the office I was in, which was very small at the time, was 3,000 people total in like the whole building. So that's a pretty big jump to go from 3,000 down to 200. And actually, when I joined Quora, it was closer to maybe like 120. So definitely a lot smaller. There are pros and cons to going to big companies versus small companies. And I don't think one of them is necessarily better or worse. It's just depending on what you want to learn. So when I was graduating from college, I was trying to figure out what did I want to do and whether that was software engineering or product management, somewhere in between. But the thing I kept coming back to was I really wanted to go somewhere where I could optimize for learning. So I thought about what were all the things that I wanted to learn and where would I have the best chance of doing that. And for me, what was really nice about going to a small company is that I felt like I was going to be able to learn the basics. I was going to be able to learn these fundamentals. When I joined Quora, we didn't have ads, we weren't even monetizing. So this seemed like a really cool opportunity to go to a company that had a proven concept. There were users, and there weren't just like 5, there were a lot. And there were a lot of people. There were people there who had experience, mentoring people from other larger companies. But I still got to watch all of these fundamental things that a company goes through, right? Like they need to grow exponentially. They need to like figure out how they're going to monetize. They're trying to figure out how do they hire and which teams and where do people go in the staffing resources. And so I thought that was like a really good opportunity. The way I thought about this was like, if you think of like building a product, like building a sandcastle, right? So if I went to a larger company, what was nice is that you've got all these blueprints, you've got all these tools, you have all these resources on like how people have built things in the past. And so if you were going to build this sandcastle or build this product, you can do it at scale. You can do it with all of the knowledge and research that has been done at that company. And if you go to a smaller company, you probably can build like a smaller sandcastle to start. But the cool thing is that, you're going to be able to figure out how exactly sandcastles are built. And you're going to figure out like, what are the tools that are needed to build this really great sandcastle. And like I said, neither of them is bad, but I think they're just different experiences. And for me, what I wanted to optimize for at the beginning was kind of learning how to build these fundamental products.
What platforms do y'all use, and then do you have to go test on different browsers? How does the product get presented, and what is the process for getting things published?
Yeah, so at Quora, we do what's called continuous deployment. So what that means is you push your code and it just deploys to everybody immediately. I mean, there are like tests that run, but effectively you just push and it goes out, and someone's going to review your code after you push. And this is different from most companies, especially companies at our scale. So most companies do what's called a pre-push review, which means that you send your code to somebody to read and like look over, and they give you comments and they tell you like, oh, you missed this case, or hey, there's a typo here, or like, this is going to be really slow, do it in a different way. They do that before it goes out to any users. In addition, a lot of the times, especially at very large companies, you do what are called releases. So you will say, okay, let's put all of the changes, in this one batch, and then we'll do an update. So kind of like if you think about the apps on your phone, sometimes you get these notifications that are like, this app is updating. That's like a patch, right? Or a release. So Quora doesn't do patches or releases. We just send our code out, which can be very scary, but it's very cool and means that we can move a lot faster. And of course, if you wanted to, you could also do pre-push review, and there are people who do pre-push review when they're doing something really risky. And obviously when you're new, you also only do pre-push reviews, but that helps us move a lot faster. Quora is available on all platforms, so desktop, mobile web. We have native apps on Android and iOS. What's kind of interesting about Quora's apps, native apps, is that we do a mixture of web views and the native components. Which means that our developers can basically build effectively like one version of Korra that will work across desktop, mobile web, and the Android and iOS apps.
Okay, let's go back to high school. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with computer science before you went to college?
When I was in high school, we were required to take a technology credit to graduate, and they didn't care what it was. There were just a couple of different courses that were available, and me being the overachiever, I took the only one that was weighted a higher percentage points for my GPA, basically. And so I took AP Computer Science, not having any idea what computer science was, and honestly not really caring, because I just wanted a higher GPA and I wanted to be able to take this AP test. And I found out that I actually had kind of a knack for it. I ended up really liking it. And at the time, there were two AP tests. So I ended up taking 2 years of computer science, which is probably now more equivalent to 1.5 years because the curriculums have changed quite a bit. When I was a senior in high school, I had the option in my course schedule of taking AP Music Theory or AP Computer Science, or like another computer science course. And what I thought about was like, well, which of these is going to be closer what I'm going to take in college? Like, how can I make sure I'm set up? And funny story, I really wanted to be a music major, and that's why I was thinking about taking music theory, because I thought this would be really helpful for college. I ended up choosing to take the third year of computer science. I did actually take flute and music lessons all through college, and I performed in recitals and everything, so I got to kind of do a little bit of both, which was exciting. But most of my experience prior to college was mostly like, just in the class. So I wasn't somebody who was like hacking like every day. I didn't like build a startup before I like went to college or anything. So yeah, pretty normal.
Well, but you also got accepted to the Turing program. And so that says something that you hadn't been programming since you were 4. Tell us about your experience with the Turing program and some highlights.
Yep. So the Turing Scholars Program, in case you haven't heard of it yet, is this honors program within the CS department, and you do research in your last year. You write a thesis, which is basically a big paper. And so the Turing Scholars Program for me was incredible. I met some of my best friends there. Actually, one of the people I met on my first day of college is the maid of honor at my wedding. Which is a little fun fact. But so the Turing Scholars Program was great academically because obviously you got to take classes with these amazing professors. You got to take honors versions of the classes. So they were very hard and graded on these insane curves, which really made you think. It was very humbling, I guess I'll say, to be able to take a class with a bunch of really smart people. In terms outside of the classroom though, the Turing Scholars Program was a huge part of my community and how I grew at UT. I was like an officer in the student org every year that I was at UT. And I have really fond memories of working together, of studying, staying up late to finish assignments, pulling all-nighters and sitting in like the honors quad and trying to like do assignments together. It was like a really, really amazing experience that I wouldn't trade for anything. And I also think had a huge impact on how happy I was when I was at UT.
Did you enjoy the research paper?
Oh, yes, actually, that's a great part. That's a great question. I had a lot of fun doing that. So my research was in CS education. And that area thinks about how do we teach computer science to students. And so I got to work with one of my best friends on this project, and we basically looked at how to teach recursion using a video game. And it was pretty cool. We actually found that students who played this video game, even if we didn't tell them it was recursion or we didn't teach them like the concept, were able to do better at writing recursive programs. We ended up writing this as a research paper and submitting it to a conference, and we got in. So we got to go to Scotland and present in front of all of these like PhD students and like professors, and we were clearly like the youngest people there, but it was a really cool like senior year summer thing where we just got to like go to Scotland for this conference. It was a lot of fun.
You loved UTCS so much that you decided to stay for the 5-year master's program. Mm-hmm. What was your decision about getting a master's, and how has it helped you?
So I knew that I always wanted to go to grad school, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to commit to a full PhD. And I figured if I was going to do a master's, it would be a lot easier to do it right after my undergrad than to do it than to like go to work and then try to do the master's on the side, or like try to go to school when I was trying to like, work and stuff like that. And then the other thing that I thought of was like, if I was gonna do 1 more year or even 2 more years straight after my undergrad, if I moved somewhere else and I was only going to stay there for 2 years, it might be hard for me to like ramp up or like learn the campus and do all these things. And so the nice part about doing an extra year at UT was I already knew the campus. I already knew all of the professors. I knew all of the people. I knew which classes to take. I didn't have to like make new friends, all of these things. And I got to still hang out with all the Turing scholars that I had met, obviously. So for me, it was kind of, you know, once I applied and I got in, I was like, oh yeah, it seems like a good trade-off to just stay here for one more year. I felt like the master's program really helped me, especially in my PM role, because it made me a lot more analytical. One interesting thing about undergraduate projects versus graduate projects is that in grad school, sometimes the assignment is like, read this paper and like critique it or think about the concepts and like what you can draw from that. And undergrad projects are very like, here's this problem, solve it. And so it's more direct and executional. So that made the fourth year a little bit hard balancing these two very different types of projects. But the nice thing about the graduate projects where you just, you know, you have to read something and think about it and critique it and almost be skeptical of the results. I have to do that all the time in my day-to-day job. So we'll see like data results or someone will run an experiment and be like, oh, I'm so excited about this. And I have to be that person that's like, you know, with the hat on that's like, okay, but let's think about this. You know, what questions do I need to ask? What data do I need in order to make sure that this result is what we think it is and whether or not we can trust it? So that's what I gained basically from doing the master's program.
So everyone knows that CS is a little more skewed towards the males, the men. Did you have any issues, or did you just kind of get in there and do your thing and not worry too much about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I was in high school, this wasn't an issue. Like no one ever mentioned it. I was also lucky because my first computer science teacher, one of the two at the school, was a woman. So it didn't seem weird to me to be doing computer science because my teacher was a woman. When I got to UT, there were only 3 women in my class of like 33, 35. And that ratio has changed quite a bit since then. So I don't want to scare anybody. That was just like, you know, many years ago. I definitely felt like I was supported. So there were women in Turing and outside of Turing that I looked up to and that I could get mentorship from. I did have but I'm not gonna lie and like say that, oh, you know, no one ever said anything. I did have a classmate who said to me like, oh, you only got that internship offer because you're a girl. And the nice thing was everybody was like, that's crazy, like you should take that back, and you know, said that he was wrong. So I did have people like stand up for me and, you know, reassure me that like it's not a gendered thing. But I think the reality is that there will always be some people who say that, and you have to just know that it's not true, and know that like companies don't have enough money in the world to just like pay people who aren't going to be good to work at their companies. So, you know, it was hard at first, and like it was kind of weird to not see as many women. But honestly, like I said, my best friend who I met on the first day of school, she sat next to me because I was the only girl in the class at the time. And now we're like best friends. We worked on our thesis together, and you know, I can't imagine my life without her, or like what my career and like my time at UT would have been like without the people that I met.
What is your obsession with boba tea?
Fun fact, I didn't actually drink boba until my like second year of college. My roommate brought me back some bubble tea from Tapioca House, and I just loved it. And so I've been drinking bubble tea ever since. And now UT has a kung fu tea that's like, you know, right off of campus. So you guys are really moving up in the world of bubble tea.
Elynn, I'd like to hear more about the internships that you did while you were at UT.
Yeah, so I interned at Facebook in 2011 when they were still in their Palo Alto office. I was on the platform-games team. The next year, I went to Amazon in Seattle and I worked on the Kindle Reader Framework team. The following year, I went to Google and I worked in their New York office on the Google Forms team. And I actually went back for a repeat internship there in 2014. So I worked at 3 different companies, 3 different cities, 3 different company sizes. One of the reasons I did that was that I strongly felt, and I still do today, I feel that internships are a really good way for you to learn what types of companies and what types of work you do and you don't like. And it's kind of an easy way to figure out, you know, what part of the world you like to live in or what kind of cities you like. So as an example, like living in New York was very different than living in Palo Alto, Santa Clara, Mountain View. and living in Seattle was different from that. When I was at Facebook, that was actually the year before they IPO'd. They didn't even have their current Menlo Park office. They were doing tours of that office the week after I left. So it was quite different. But Facebook was at the time very scrappy, very small, very like, they were still saying move fast and break things. And so I wanted to go to a company that was not as scrappy and hacky, and I wanted to go somewhere with a little bit more structure. So I went to Amazon, and I really enjoyed Seattle. And that team was also a little bit more back-end than what I was doing at Facebook. And then the following year, I decided instead of going back to Amazon, even though I really liked the team, I was going to try something totally different. I'd always loved New York, and I wanted to try what would it be like to work in an office that wasn't the headquarters, right? So Google has a New York office that is huge now, but I went and worked on the Google Forms team, which at the time only had 3 full-time engineers, which was the smallest team I'd ever worked on. And I'm really happy that I did that because it made me realize how much I really loved working on smaller teams. And I also realized that I liked some of the structure that Google had, but they weren't as rigid as my experience when I was at Amazon. So it just gave me like another color and another experience. And then obviously when I was graduating, even though I decided to not go back to Google, a lot of the lessons that I learned from all of my internships are things that I use every day when I'm at Quora and when I mentor people here as well.
Do you have any things any advice you'd like to give to high school students that are preparing to hopefully come into computer science?
Yeah. So the first one is to just like take a deep breath sometimes. I think, computer science, just like a lot of other disciplines, especially when you go to college, can be really tough. And you're gonna encounter these problems, and at first you're not gonna know how to solve them. And the key here is to like not get stressed out, and to know when you need to ask for help and know how to talk to other people. So I think that's like my biggest piece of advice for people going into college is like, try to take a deep breath and not stress too much, because you can develop anxiety and that doesn't help you perform anywhere. So that's like the first thing that comes to mind. The second is that it may not seem like it, but computer science is actually a very it's a discipline where you have to work together and collaborate with a lot of people. So just be open to that, be ready for that, and get excited about that. So yeah, that's like probably one of my favorite parts about, studying computer science and building products is that like, it's not something you just necessarily have to do in a vacuum. And so if you're like me and you're an extrovert and chatty, you actually work pretty well in CS because you got to work with a lot of people. But yeah.
Elynn, I want to thank you for spending some time with us. We know everybody's schedules are busy, so we're happy to reconnect with you after a few years.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really great to come back, and everyone have fun.